Good day, our listeners. Welcome to our Camp David podcast. Today, Pete, we're going to talk about when a boy becomes a man. So, before we start, this is Pete Miller. I'm Jaco Becker. We're going to have a discussion about masculinity. Sometimes masculinity has been, pictured in a skew way. And Pete, I'm pretty excited about today. I think there's a few things that we need to say, that people need to hear, especially men, especially fathers, because a boy needs a father to help him, to guide him to become a man.
Yeah.
So maybe to start, Pete, do you think there's an age determining when a boy becomes a man?
Yeah. No, I don't think that for a boy to become a man is age related, because you get some 40-year-old boys trying to play man, and usually it just ends up hurting a lot of people. And then you get some 12-year-old men that, because of the circumstances in their life, they had to make the decision to become a man. And so I don't think it's age related, and especially if you look at the physiology of humans, women to some extent have an indicator of when she goes from being a girl to becoming a woman. And we won't talk too much about that, but I know that makes some men uncomfortable, so we'll skip that part. But men don't really have anything like that, and there's no specific time in your life where your body goes, you're a man now. And I think that's what makes it difficult, because I think in essence every man wants to know, I'm good enough, I'm a man, I've got what it takes. Don't know what your take is on that.
I think that's good. If you look back in history, when boys had to be warriors, when going to war and fighting battles, they needed to be men quite early in their lives.
Yeah.
And today in society where everything's comfortable, you get whatever you want, whenever you want it, it's almost like comfort makes us stay boys longer. Even when you have your 21st birthday, most, let's call them men, still act like boys.
Yeah.
They're not ready to make decisions, to take responsibility for their life, for being a man, for the choices they make. Maybe that's a keyword we can discuss, the responsibility.
Oh, yeah.
What does it mean to take responsibility? Does that determine if a boy is a man or not?
Yeah, definitely. But just to get back to the point of the 21st, just the looking at the general 21st, especially in South Africa, and I'm pretty sure it looks similar around the world. Just what happens on the 21st is a good indication that you're definitely not able to be considered a man, just from what's happening there, because it's not. There's no responsibility. I was lucky enough to not have a 21st like that, but the rest of my life around about that time, before I met Christ, wasn't looking like that. So yeah, but definitely that. And if you look at what you were talking about, the traditions of when a boy becomes a man, I think it's very good from tradition side to see that it was intentional, that other men went to get the boys. And I know there's a tradition, I think it's in New Guinea, where the men are the dad of the boy. So there's a boy that's getting to the age of 12, 13. So the dad goes to the rest of the village, gets some of the men, they put on scary masks, and then they go into the house where the boy is with the mom, and then they grab him from there. And the mom, she's in on it, but she grabs him and goes, "No, don't take my boy, don't take my boy." But then eventually she lets go because the men are just pulling. And and then they pull him outside and they start beating on him, but not to such an extent that he can't fight back. As a matter of fact, they're holding back to give him a chance to fight back. And as soon as he starts fighting back, they let him win. And as soon as he's won, the dad goes, takes off his mask, puts it on the boy and says, welcome. But the thing about that is that it's intentional and it comes from other men. And from there, he learns responsibility. So then the men say, look, we've accepted you as a man. We're not saying you're necessarily there yet, but we consider you a man and we will teach you the ways of what it is to be a man moving forward from here. And I think that's where society these days, to some extent, is lacking, because we don't have that anymore. Our parents, to some extent, had that when they moved to the military. But I mean, even some of those guys, if you look at them today, they still act like boys, because they never really made the switch in their minds, even though they say that they grew up to be men. But I think that's where we have to have the discussion with regards to responsibility.
Well, I think it's a good story because it brings out the test that boys need to go through. I mean, if you grow up in a comfortable home, getting everything you want all the time, there's not really a test that tests if you have what it takes to be a man. And maybe the test is part of the transition from moving from a boy to a man, you know. I mean, boys mostly don't understand that life is hard because they get whatever they want.
Yeah.
And mommy keeps on nurturing. So there must be a time where the dad almost pulls the boy away from the mother's nursing, you know, the comfort side from the mom, which is not bad, it's her role.
Yeah.
But if a boy should ever become a man, there must be a switch from the mom to the dad where he learns what it means to work hard, that life is hard, you're going to have to fight for certain things that you want in life. And I mean, John Aldrich always says, a boy yearns to be tested, to discover if he has what it takes. And I mean, the biggest thing men wonder about is, am I good enough? Do I have what it takes to, you know, be a man, to stand in my role in society, to be a good husband, to be a good father? Will I ever make it?
Yeah.
And I mean, if it doesn't happen that a dad takes the boy from the mom and starts fathering him through life, and lets him go when he does dangerous things, you know, don't just, no, stop, it is dangerous, you're going to get hurt. Let him do what he's doing, take the chances, go through the risk, and always be there to guide him, give him some pointers, but let him do, take the risk and take the responsibility, and test what is good, what is bad, to discover if he has what it takes.
Yeah, I was so glad you mentioned John Eldridge, because I was thinking exactly about that, because we handle that at Camp David in our Adventure to Live camp. We go intensely into that. But while he's being in the beloved son stage, that's to some extent, he's under his father, but he's mostly with his mother. But when he moves to the next stage of his life, where it's cowboy, he needs to be able to test those boundaries, and he needs to be dangerous. And that's where a dad needs to come in, because I know from my wife, letting a mother do that, he's never going to climb a tree. She's not even going to let him get close to the tree, because then something might fall on his head or something like that.
Or he might fall on his head.
Something like, there will always be something.
Yeah.
But a dad will go, climb the tree. You know you want to climb the tree. And I know with Pierre, the first time he went to a climbing wall, I left my wife at the table drinking coffee or something. And I went with him. And he started climbing, and then he got to a place where he didn't know where to go next. And I think that's what's needed in a bigger sense as well. Because my next instructions were not, it's okay to come down. It's, let's see if we can go a bit further. I think you should move your foot to this block. And if you put it there, then you can move your hand to the next one and then go from there. And he was able, that was a great day, but I mean, he was able to move from there and actually reach the top. just from some pointers, because I was seeing a bigger picture, and I was already in that place where I could see what's happening and what needs to be done. But also, he needed to be a place where he could trust me. Luckily, he did. But still, he was scared in that moment. But the moment he reached the top, he was like, "Oh wow, this is amazing! I've accomplished something." And I think,
in other words, he was busy with the test,
yeah,
taking the risk, and you were busy guiding him through the test. Because he needs to know that he's not alone. It's part of the journey.
yeah,
He's not alone. He can go through the test, although it's hard, although he may get hurt. He needs to go through it.
yeah,
And I think that's probably, with the test and the hardship that a boy needs to understand, helps him in the process of becoming a man. And it learns the boys, what it means to take responsibility. I mean, I'm thinking about the rugby that my boys play right now.
yeah,
In the beginning, they were really careful. This boy comes half-hearted, he tackles him, goes to ground. Next one comes, it's a little bit harder, bit more risk. Then the big boy comes, he stands off again, and they test. It's all about the test.
yeah,
And sometimes they get angry. I think sometimes it happens way too late, and they just go all out fight. Okay, not with the fists, but they just hammer into the scrum, the ruck. And in the same way, life should be the same thing. When they finish a game, they always ask me, "Dad, was I man of the match?" Then I'm honest, I don't think so. Or yes, whatever. But then I always say, but whatever happened, I'm proud of you. You did well. And these are the points I think we can work on to be a better rugby player.
yeah,
Because I'm helping to build them to understand, yes, they're doing well because they're trying hard, but there's still points that they can do better next time.
yeah. And I think that's one of the things that you mentioned now as well, is the trying. Because I know with Pierre as well, more often than not, I reward him either verbally or in some manner for just at least trying, whether he did something or not, whether he failed or accomplished it. Just trying is the good part, because that's where I think as men we also learn to take responsibility. We don't know how to take responsibility if we don't understand that they more often than not will probably be some form of risk involved. Because if I take myself into consideration currently, I have to make a decision between two sports. I want to start skydiving, but that means that for this year I can't play hockey because the two are going to clash, and I'm going to spend money on hockey that I can use to do skydiving, and that's a risk. I have to take the risk because I don't know if I'm going to carry on skydiving for as long as I've been playing hockey, but it's definitely something I want to do. So I have to take that risk and say, listen, I'm willing to give up this one thing to do the other thing. And I think that ties into, you need to take the responsibility. You need to have the focus and the clarity of mind to understand that if I take responsibility of something, it means if I take responsibility of my own actions, that means that whether the decision works out well or not, I will be standing there and taking the responsibility of whatever happens.
The consequences.
The consequences. So if the consequences are good, great, If the consequences are bad, fine. And then we learn from them. And I think that is a very important thing. And I think that's one of the big problems these days, is because of how the world sees men, and because how the fight back from men from the world's side is very toxic. It causes some men to be so confused about what it is to be a man that they don't want to take responsibility, because there is a risk that they might be considered toxic because they did it wrong. And because of that, now they just want to sit down and do nothing, which is even worse.
Yeah.
Because if you've got a train going in one direction, all you need to go in the right direction is get it on the right track. But if it's standing still, it's going nowhere. And that's I think one of the big problems with today with young men. And I mean that we see a lot of it with our battle to fights, with the camps that we do. That one of the biggest concerns that we have is the comfort that they grew up in. They never had to make a decision where they had to take the responsibility for their actions. The consequence was never theirs to face. Dad picked up the bill. Mom picked up the bill. Somebody paid that price.
Which means, I think we're touching on passivity right now, which is, I think, a good point. Because a man somewhere needs to learn what it means to lay down your life, to give yourself to something bigger than the life you live, you know. And if there's no testing, no hardship, no risk taking, then you'll never learn what it means to lay down your life. No. And I think we as men were made to fight battles. We just mostly fight the wrong battles, you know. And mostly when we're drunk, when we had too many, we fight the wrong battle.
That's very interesting. I saw a podcast the other day. I think it was Jordan Peterson and Jocko Willing, and very, very interesting. Jocko was a Navy SEAL commander, and he's a huge guy, and he also learned how to fight. And he said the greatest thing from that is that it gave him the confidence not to fight, because he didn't have to prove something. And I think that's the biggest thing. That's why we need to be able to be dangerous, but hold that back. And I think it also gets to the point where I listened to that this morning in Matthew, where it says the meek will inherit the earth. That meek doesn't mean weak. It means somebody that's able to use the sword but keep it sheathed. And that's definitely, from that there's responsibility to not take it out. But if you don't have the sword or don't know how to use it, you can't. It's not going to make a difference.
So most men, boys/men, are passive because they're scared of trying.
Yeah.
Because they've never learned what it means to take a chance, swing at something, or just take the risk.
Yeah, take the risk.
And if we can teach boys and men to to face the hardships and find yourself in the difficulty, in the challenges, then your character will be built for whatever you need to be, or whatever you need to do.
Building character, I think it gets back to where you as a man have to lay down your life for something bigger. And that's an example that's given to us in the scriptures as well.
So we can go to that. It's Ephesians 5.
Yeah, that would be great.
Where Paul speaks about, husbands and wives. And he tells the wives, of course, everybody knows this, wives, submit your husbands. And husbands quote this way too much.
Oh, yeah.
But he says to the husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. And that's, I think, the way God made us, to give ourselves. That's why most men like the military so much, because you give yourself to something bigger, something worthwhile fighting for. And if we were made to do that, but nobody teaches us to take the risk, then where are we going to learn it? We're just going to escape to some computer game or some addiction, because then we feel safe.
Yeah, and you're going to do exactly that with that. You're going to give yourself to that, but the end result will be nothing.
Yeah.
Because if the game server crashes, all of your accomplishments are gone. If your addiction ends up in death, all of it is just a waste of money and time and love.
And it ruins the people around you, the relationships you have.
And that's the other thing. I mean, it doesn't accomplish anything. It doesn't get you someplace. And that's where I think it needs to be taught and guided, where men need other men to walk with them that path. And I think that's where brotherhood is so important. Because especially if you look at the scriptures, I mean, Proverbs 27 verse 17, reading out of the ESV here, it says iron sharpens iron and one man sharpens another. I mean, that when you start grinding a knife to get it to a place, I'm currently working on a friend's knife, and I'm going to have to take quite some metal away. You know, there's some of it is, if you're the metal, it's not going to be nice, but if you get to the end of that knife is going to be at a place where it can shave the hairs of your arm, and it'll cut a piece of paper without putting any tension on it. And that's what brotherhood is, especially as a Christian, is that you and I are walking a path together. I consider you a man. I consider myself an equal to you, and because of that, I consider myself a man. But also a case of we love saying in Camp David, we love saying when two Navy SEALs are running, swimming, riding bicycles, whatever, insert whatever activity, it's a race. And it's competitiveness, but it's a good competitiveness. It's not I'm trying to trip you over or that. I want to test myself to you and see how good it is. How good can I perform with that? But at the end of the day, when we get to the end of it, it's a case of, okay, so yes, you beat me on this. Okay, so where can I improve? Okay, I need to work on my diet because I need to lose some weight so that I can not have to carry so much. I need to work on my strength training because I need to run faster, whatever the case may be. But it's a case of where we have relationship, and in that relationship, it's a case of, okay, so you are a bit higher than I am, but you're pulling me up to get to there.
Yes.
And because of that, we are building. And if there are other certain places where I am better in certain things than you are, I'm pulling you up to there. And that's what's so needed in this world, because the world out there, it's dog eat dog. I mean, if I need to get to the top, I'm climbing on top of as many people as I can, and eventually that'll tumble.
Yes. I think that's really good, because where is a man confirmed? It's with his father, and of course with God who created him, and amongst his brothers.
Oh, yeah.
And the society today tells us that we should isolate ourselves, build our own kingdoms, and do as well as we can, despite whatever happens around us. But the kingdom principle is different. The kingdom says, take a band of brothers, a community of people, and go to the top together. Carry each other's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. I mean, that's a different way of loving one another if we move together. So it's not a unhealthy kind of competition.
No.
I need to beat you, so I need to better myself. No, we're going together. I need to test myself against something. So I surround myself with the right men that I can see how do I compare in certain aspects that's important to me. My values, who I want to become. And then according to how I measure myself, I can adjust in my life. What's important, what is less important, what should I aim at? Whatever we need to do, it's not about the comfort. We do what needs to be done to be men of God, to build His kingdom, to give our lives, because that's the responsibility we need to take. And if we look at boys, I turned 40 last year, and there's so many of my friends, they're still boys, They act like boys. The other day, I was sitting in a restaurant talking with some of my old rugby friends, and they still do the same things. They drink way too much, they're married, they have kids, set bad examples. They have way too many girlfriends on the side. And I was just like so shocked that they are still stuck in those lifestyles, in the boy phase of life. Never moved on to become real men, taking responsibility. And of course, that's one of the reasons why women take on the men's roles in a family.
Yeah, so I think it's great, and especially the scripture you mentioned earlier about the woman submitting to their wives. The husbands submitting to the women submitting to their husbands. If you look at that, women don't want to submit to someone that's not going to protect them, which makes sense if you look at it like that. Because if you submit to a clown, you're going to be part of the laughing stock. And if he's still a boy, he's not going to be able to protect you. So from women's side, it makes sense if the man is not laying down his life for his family and for his wife, then it makes sense that the woman is not going to submit, because submitting means that she's going to let her family fail. She's going to let her kids get hurt.
Yep.
And that's actually a scary place to be. And because if you look at a woman, her nature, as God intended it, is to care for her family, which includes her husband, but definitely her children. I mean, you hear all the stories about women lifting cars and things if their children are in danger. So there's definitely something to that, but that makes our responsibility as men so much bigger to go from being a boy to a man. And the 1 Corinthians 13 scripture that you have is, when I was a boy, I thought as a boy, and I did a boy. But when I became a man, I laid down the things of a boy. And I mean, that's a conscious decision you have to make, because you need to be able to say, I can't carry on doing all these silly things that have no effect and only cause hurt.
If you move back to when a boy becomes a man, if a boy is never taught that life is hard, he needs to take responsibility, bear the consequences for his decisions, for his actions, and that he needs to lay his life down, then he'll never be able to be and create a safe space for his wife and his kids.
Yeah.
Which means he's not fighting for them, because fighting for something is hard.
Yeah.
It's tough. It might even cost you your life, but as a man, if a boy ever transitions to being a man, he creates a safe space, because he knows all those things. Despite the hardship, he takes the responsibility and the risk, and he creates what needs to be created for a family to thrive.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, that's probably why I think the biggest attack against our society is on masculinity.
Yeah.
Because take away the man and everything crumbles.
The whole family crumbles.
It's what we see in society today. And that's, I think, why what we do in so many other men's ministries, and with raising up men, journeying towards what it means to be a godly man, is so important.
Yeah.
Because we can't just settle and accept that more than 50% of marriages, even in the church, fails.
Yeah.
It's not good enough. Somebody has to do something about it. And another thing that I'm thinking about, a boy normally only thinks about himself, right?
Yeah.
That's why the isolation happens so easily. I mean, my one boy, he wants to be the best rugby player, not because he wants his team to win, but because he wants to be the best. He's still learning what it means to move in a pack, to think about the rest around him. And it's a normal, healthy transition he's going through, but I need to guide him,
Yeah.
He needs to know what it means and the value of surrounding yourself with the right men. And most young men I see these days, the moment they get married, it's as if the brothers, the friends, just get thrown away, pushed aside. Just you and your wife, which is so unhealthy.
Yeah, and wives in that matter should actually not encourage that.
Yeah.
Yes, they need attention. Yes, the husband needs to be with his wife, but it should alarm a woman if her new husband is only spending time with her and not spending time with his good brothers. Because I think that's another thing, is that if you look at many of the rum parties that happen before marriage, before the wedding ceremony,
The bachelor parties.
the bachelors and all that, those are just a bunch of boys moaning about this guy getting married, which is a great step. I mean, that's definitely taking on responsibility. But now they making it as if it's nothing. And then you see some more of that at the wedding itself, where when the man needs to take in that step where he says, "This is where I am gonna congratulate my bride, thank my bride, thank the people that was involved with this ceremony, give him his voice." Instead of allowing him to speak out and give his voice, they're breaking him down.
Yep.
They're keeping him a boy because they're not allowing him to step up as a man. And I think that's why so many wives don't want their husbands to spend time with his friends, because they're a bunch of boys. They're going to keep him a boy.
Yeah.
So she's actually trying to protect her husband by keeping him from his horrible friends.
Yep.
But that's why, as a man, you need to be in a place where you've got brothers, where she goes, you need to go away for the weekend and spend some time with your brothers, because you are driving me nuts.
Go shoot something.
Go shoot something, go climb a mountain, go jump out of an airplane, whatever, paint something.
So this means that a man needs to take responsibility for who he surrounds himself with as well.
Definitely.
It shouldn't just be random choice or randomized, Yeah, you work with me, just be friends. No. Choose the right guys. The guys that will build you up, that will push you towards being more Christ-like.
Yeah.
Support you in your marriage, in your family, that you can be the man God created you to be.
Yeah, well, it's a godly principle, but it's being applied in business and entrepreneurship quite a lot, because Napoleon Hill wrote in his book, which I can't remember the name of now, but he wrote in there that one of the biggest principles he's got in there is masterminding, because you become the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. So if your 5 people that you surround yourself with are delinquents, then guess what? You will be one. If you surround yourself with 5 boys, guess what? You will be a boy.
Yep.
If you surround yourself with 5 godly men and you spend intentional time with them, well, guess what? That is who you will become. And so I agree with that completely, and it's being applied by the world to business, but it extends so much further into our lives as well. In that, if you do that, if you spend your time with men, then you will be a man, because either they're gonna, if you keep on acting like a boy, they will leave you behind because they don't have time for that. Because I'm not going to waste my time on somebody that keeps on resisting becoming a man. I will spend time with him in the beginning, but if he keeps on fighting back, I will leave him. And it might be hard, but he needs to learn that lesson then.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it difficult, I think, it's getting through to someone to say, hey, what you're doing is not building me.
Yeah. So maybe to wrap up, what does this mean practically? I mean, if a boy is still a boy and he needs to transition, where does it start for him? If a father needs to guide a boy through this journey in becoming a man, where does it start? And I think practically it starts with the small things, taking responsibility for your bed every morning. Even maybe washing the dishes, which nobody likes doing, but teaches you to do the hard things.
Yeah.
Wash the dishes, sweep the floors, wash the car. Don't just use everything, but work on maintaining everything as well. Help mom with the food. It's okay. Men can make food as well.
Yeah.
It's okay. You don't just have to braai, Do what needs to be done. So doing the small things. When you get up, instead of getting up at 6, make it 5:30, that you can learn to make your bed. Clean your room, that you can start the day on a good place, and then serve wherever you can. Servanthood, which is difficult, helps create good character. To get a place to serve, in your dad's house, if you're out of the house, at church or wherever, give yourself to something. And in the process, of giving yourself, you'll find God, you'll find yourself, and you'll find your purpose. And which is, of course, part of that is being a man.
Agreed.
So just to wrap up, we spoke about, when does a boy become a man? It's not connected to age. It's connected to hardship, taking responsibility, taking some risks, testing yourself if you have what it takes, laying your life down, and surrounding yourself with the right men that will encourage you and build you into being a godly man. So may we be those men that does not get stuck in being boys, but lives as men of God.